Let's make mixed tempura rice bowl, also called Tendon in Japanese. It's actually a very simple mise en place. It just takes a little bit of preparation. Let's get started with the shrimp. First, we want to make sure that we start with some pretty large shrimp. These are 12-15 shrimp, and they are peeled and deveined, but the tail is still on. And it's important that the tail is still on because that's part of having authentic tempura. What I'm doing here is I'm just cleaning the tail. So you just snip off a little bit at the edge, and then you scrape so that any of that moisture on the inside is gone. And that way, when you fry it, it stays nice and crisp. So I'm going to do this for all my shrimp. And I have 6 pieces of shrimp here because I'm doing 2 portions. But for you, because you have your ingredient kit, you'll have 1 portion. So just keep that in mind. So now that the tails are all cleaned properly, we can turn these into tempura shrimp. So the way that you do that is we want to keep in mind that the shrimp, in the end, you want it to stay straight when it is fried. So since it's curled on the inside, you want to give these shrimp little tiny shallow cuts on the inside. Make sure you don't cut through it now. And then after it is shallow cut on the inside, you flip it over. And once it's flipped over, you kind of give it a press. Sometimes you have to cut again if you haven't done a good job. So flip it over and you just give it a little press. And what this does is it opens up the shrimp. It makes it a little bit larger and the surface area is increased so that it's ready to be straight shrimp tempura. And we'll just complete this process for the remainder of the shrimp. So I'm doing 2 portions here, so I have 6 shrimp. But for your mise en place, you should have 3. Now, if you wanted to do more shrimp on your own, you definitely could do that, but you'd have to purchase it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you my finished tempura mise en place and walk you through how to make the batter. Here is my mise en place. I have some assorted vegetables, which I have cut here. So I have a sweet potato that I cut pretty thinly, based on what it says in your recipe guide, and some carrot and some mushroom and 3 little onion rings, and then the shrimp. Now it's really easy to just mix and match whatever you want to do, so you can do that as well. Let's make the batter. So first we want to mix the dry ingredients together. So we have our cake flour and our cornstarch. We want to get this mixed well because we're going to remove some of it and put it in a separate bowl. Because the thing about tempura is that in order for the batter to properly adhere to the pieces of things that you're frying, you have to make sure there's a little bit of that powder on it prior to putting the batter. So once we have this mix, I'm going to set a little bit off to the side, maybe about 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup, and then I can proceed with my wet batter. Now let's start our wet batter. We have our egg yolks here, and this provides a little bit of richness to the batter. Something that you could do with this batter is add a little bit of dashi powder. I've seen that before as well, and that really kind of amps up the big flavor once you're eating the tempura, but that's completely up to you. At this point, we're going to add our ice water. Please make sure that it's nice and cold, and when you're adding your batter, remember that your batter needs to be a little bit more on the thinner side versus the thicker side. So it should look like a crepe batter versus a pancake batter. So you'll see what that looks like when I'm done mixing. Now, another thing to also remember is that tempura batter should not be overmixed. So you're not going to get out your mixer to do this. You want to do this by hand with a whisk, and see how I'm not so much whisking, but rather kind of just using the whisk and kind of going up and down and then doing a couple of rounds with it. And therefore, it does not get overmixed. I'm doing this alternatively. So round and then up and down and then round and then up and down. This is the batter texture that you're looking for here. This is crepe batter texture. I know it looks a little thin, but trust me, it definitely makes the result crispier. So now we have our, excuse me, our tempura frying setup. You see I have my pot of oil, and I also have a bridge made out of aluminum foil. This really helps for a cleanup after you're done. So you know you're going to drip because it's going to have that kind of trail when you have the batter. So right now I'm testing the oil to see if it's ready. And you know it's ready when the little pieces of tempura immediately float to the top. And right now they're floating to the top a little too slowly. So I'm going to wait another minute or two, and I will test it again so you can see what proper oil temperature looks like. But if you're looking with a thermometer, it's about 365 degrees. Here we go again. So as you can see right here, it came up really quickly. You see how it's sizzling, but it's not browning. That's the key. So it's sizzling quickly, but not browning. If it browns quickly, that means that your oil is way too hot. So I know you can't exactly see what I've done, but I have my little dry powder off to the side, and I dipped my vegetables in there first prior to putting it in my wet batter. And now you see I'm dropping in my pieces. So we want to ensure that once we put our items in, that we increase the heat on our pot just a smidge, and we're constantly kind of watching the oil temperature. Because as we put things into the oil temperature will drop, and we want to keep it at that 350 to 365 degrees kind of range. Now, what you could do, as some places do, is they want to get their tempura extra crispy. They want to have an extra kind of thick crust on theirs. So you can do fry for a couple minutes first, and then some places actually put the vegetable back into the batter, and then they put it into the frying oil again. So that's another method to ensure that your item is very crispy. So you saw there with my chopsticks, I took a little bit of the batter and I kind of drizzled some of it over, and that makes little tempura crispies that we call tenkasu. And I will make some really, really crispy, kind of light tenkasu close to the end, and you can see what that um, method looks like. So we're frying this until we get a very light golden color. If it gets dark golden, that means that it's burned and it will have that bitter taste. So a light, very light golden color, and then you take it out and you put it on your rack. And you move on with all the rest. So you might notice that every time I change to a different ingredient that I'm frying, that I clean it with my little spider there. So that's very important, because if you leave those pieces in there to fry and fry and fry, it will get bitter, and then the other remaining things that you're frying will also get bitter. Okay, so now the star of the show, which is the shrimp. So the key with doing tempura with shrimp is ensuring that you don't just dump the shrimp in the beginning and let it curl. So you notice that I hold the end of the shrimp there for a few seconds to let the oil kind of acclimate, and then I drop it in. And you'll notice at the end that our shrimp is as straight as it can be, or it's at least I tried to make it as straight as it could be. So hold it a little bit and then drop it in. And now we're going to do a technique that you'll see in a lot of Japanese restaurants, where they make the extra crispy, flaky, very fine tenkatsu. So what you want to do is take out some of your existing tempura batter and add maybe, I don't know, a couple tablespoons of, no, more like a quarter cup of water to it, because you want to thin it out a bit. And then you take your hand and you see that I've kind of just drizzled little kind of droplets of the tenkatsu into the oil, and it creates this feather-like, very fragile but crispy tenkatsu. And people really love that. You can serve that along with all of the rice and things that you're serving, and it adds really nice texture. Now that we're done frying, we could assemble our mixed tempura rice bowl, tendon. So we have our freshly cooked rice, and I like to put my sweet potatoes in the back. Whatever's tallest, you want to put in the back. And you find just whatever bowl you have for this, or putting the other vegetables here, so just an assortment of different items. And then we're going to put our star of our show in the front, which is the shrimp. Now this week, you're working on two different shrimp dishes. And the reason I added this mixed tempura in with the recipes is so that you can understand another method of cooking shrimp. Now, for this one, you're deep frying it, but the prep ahead of time is really the key here for the competency. So you see how straight that piece of tempura is? And I'm going to put some of that crispy tenkatsu on the top. And I'm going to serve this with the tempura sauce, which is called tentsuyu, on the side. And remember that your tentsuyu should be hot when you serve it with your bowl as well. Okay, well, I hope you had fun with this assignment this week. Who doesn't love tempura, right? So enjoy, 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 and we'll see you next week.